Yeah, I gotta come down.
I will do introductions for us. Like I said, good morning. My name is Chris Barber. I'm the Executive Director of the Albany Reserve Commission. Going around the table to my left is Sean Reynolds, our Board Chair, representing the Patty McLaughlin's our Office Manager, recording minutes for us. Thank you, Patty. Casey Holdsworth, the State Parks. Brad Glass, City of Albany. Andrew Curry, the Town of Colony. Pat Curran, from Albany County and Don State Parks, the Town of Groveland. Online, we have John Brust, citizen member. Welcome, John. And Harvey Alexander, citizen member, as well online.
Good morning. Good morning, all.
Okay.
First item on the agenda is the consideration of the meeting minutes from the December 18th, 2025 board meeting. Are there any comments? We have a motion to accept the meeting minutes. I'll make the motion. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Are there any comments from the public this morning? Hearing none, moving right along. Reports, Commission Chair. Just wanted to report for the first time ever, DEC Region 4 staff had a meeting here with Pine Bush staff in February with Joel and Tyler and Neil and their respective teams, as well as our wildlife unit, real property, and the forestry unit. We spent a couple hours. Neil and Joel co-presented a great presentation on what's done here at the Pine Bush. A lot of great networking opportunity, and we're already seeing the results. I want to thank all of you again. It was a great opportunity for our staff to have some FaceTime with you. Some of them have never met you before, but I've heard a lot about you. I've received a ton of positive feedback. So thanks for everything that you did and for making those connections for our staff. I know we have some folks coming over for S1 3190 or for Del Mar. I think it's in Del Mar next week, but thanks again for all of your work on that. Really appreciated that. That's all I have.
Okay. Members?
Support.
I'd like to just, we also will meet this winter with Pine Bush DEC and our park staff for an attractions for both our bird and Big Bend this year. That was a really constructive meeting, really appreciated bringing all three groups together. A lot of positivity in terms of coordinating and working well together and sort of building those relationships, as well as some items that we thought all could improve, which we're working on right now. Part of that also was we just recently had a fire refresher at Central Spa for Region 5. So we're now, thanks to this work here, partnering more with the Region 5 and their rangers, a lot of burns at Big Bend, as well as a lot of Region 4 kind of staff and our Pine Bush staff who were familiar with Pine Bush, so it was great to start creating more Region 5 and getting their experience on the park. So very happy with that. And for our upcoming year, we have now 125 acres for burns and this year. So we're working with Pine Bush and DEC and our park staff, which is also trained up to get those managed this year. So we're really excited for the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Director. I will point everybody to the program update. Please make sure if you haven't had an opportunity to go to that. Staff put quite a bit of effort in that, and thank you, Patty, for the effort that you put into organizing and make it look nice in Microsoft Publisher. So just a couple of things I will point out. It is mentioned in the update, but I want to thank the Special Events Committee and all the staff that participated in Night at the Discovery Center this year. It was February 13th. This postcard that we did a mailing of that 8,000 folks around us received in their mailbox. We had about a little over 220 people. We had lots of events here. We had live animals. We had activities, crafts, a bird banding demo. Let's see what I'm going to forget. A book signing. We had a hot beverage truck. A lot of stuff. What did I miss? Hikes. Oh, yeah, right. We didn't do hikes the first time we did hiking. We did 3 hikes. Thank you. We had campfire. We had music. So it was good, a lot of fun. So thank you, everybody, for who helped put that together and help participate. I would like to also recognize, I see Faith Seeley back there. Faith Seeley is new to us. Faith is a seasonal employee of ours who started with the education team. Faith started last week, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Close. And I will thank Emily Nelson, who's I don't see, but Emily is wrapping up. She's also with the education team, seasonal member. She is wrapping up next month. So if I'm sure she'll watch this video, so she will do that. Quickly, budget, for those of you who have paid attention to New York State budget, I did communicate that both houses released their one house budget, the Assembly and the Senate. They released those last Monday. They voted on those last Thursday. And they had what they call the mothership, which was this past Monday, for those of you who do follow state politics, where they basically talk about and express what changes they've made to the executive budget, the governor's budget. Long story short, governor proposed $425 million for the Environmental Protection Fund this year. Both houses boosted that to $500 million. The Assembly increased our appropriation from 3.1 to 3.5 proposed, and the Senate increased that 3.1 to 5 million. What happens at the end of the day, we will see. There are conversations that the budget will be on time by April 1st, and then there are other conversations that say, no, it will not. So we'll see. And with that will wrap up my rotation.
Discovery Grounds Project, Center Grounds Project, Karen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have just a quick update on the Discovery Center Grounds Improvement Project. So we have continued our bi-weekly meetings with Colliers and OGS. They've been working really hard on completing the program report. So the program report includes the findings. It also includes a recommended scope of work and then a cost estimate for that. So Colliers completed a draft that went to OGS. OGS reviewed it, provided feedback, and we anticipate to have a copy of the report by the end of the month. That's it. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Technical Committee, Neil.
Good morning, everyone. In your packets, page 13 is the quarterly technical committee report. I have a summary that I was going to present. Uh-oh, Wendy's here. Wait for me. Anticipating.
And you don't want the report up. You're going to use yours.
Correct.
We got it.
Yeah, that way it's good. Two. From the beginning, because it's a very good place to start. So there's a summary that starts on page 13 for the quarterly technical committee report. I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight a couple of projects. There are a total of 9 that we have reviewed this quarter. Pretty much all of these are continuations of projects that we have reviewed and updated you on at last quarter's meeting. The 2 I'm going to focus on, you can see there are 3 in Colony, 3 in Guilderland, 2 in Albany. But I wanted to focus in on the 1 in Colony and 1 in Guilderland, both of which are in full protection areas. We talked about this last quarter, the proposal for Lysha Solar, adjacent to and surrounded by reserve land. The only update we have is they have initiated their seeker review with DEC. I was invited to participate in a meeting with DEC and the applicant regarding their applications for endangered species permits that they will need, as well as wetland permits that they're going to need. So that is in process currently with Region 4, while the applicant is working on putting together their response to comments that were received on the draft environmental impact statement. All of that will go back to the town of Colony. Any questions on Lysha Solar? The other one is a reprise of an earlier project, if you recall, in the town of Guilderland, right down the street here on Route 155 in full protection area 3. There was a planned unit development that was approved several years ago for this property on 155. On this map, 155 is on the right-hand side of the screen. The applicant is proposing to build on about 7 to 8 acres on the east side of the ravine and donate the back portion of the ravine, roughly 40 acres, to the town for inclusion in the preserve. What they're proposing are they revised it slightly from what I reported last quarter. It's 2 buildings, 210 units, 1 4-story building, 1 5-story building, tucked in back off of Route 155. And see the ravine, the top of the screen there on that color photo. The application for the planned unit development went before the town board. The town board, I believe, accepted that application, forwarded the application on to the planning board, who met this past week. The planning board took an initial review of the sketch plan, decided they needed significantly more information, tabled any decision until the next time the applicant comes before the planning board. I attended that meeting. One of the good things, I think, for us at that meeting in particular, lots of great questions from the planning board. The planning board is definitely on top of this and very well aware of all of the preserve issues, as well as, of course, traffic and economic and lots of other issues that are beyond the purview of the commission. But the community response and the community's response and their questions that they asked at the planning board were almost exclusively about the Pine Bush, and not just members of Save the Pine Bush, but other community members as well. It was clear for the relatively small crowd at that meeting, most of the people that were there for this project were there to ask about and advocate for the preserve and the work that the commission do, which was nice to see. So I will continue to monitor that. The town's got a great system of emails to notify us of when meetings are. We have a really good relationship with the town planner, Tim Kowalczyk, as well as the supervisor, of course. So we'll continue to stay on top of this project as it moves through the review process. They'll ultimately need to go through seeker, assuming an environmental impact statement, but yet to be seen. So stay tuned on that. Casey?
Do you think, like, they're asking for updates and changes and whatnot, do you think that would change the overall sort of idea of 40 acres donated versus developing the front? Like, would that change that
As the
overall?
town planners like to tell me, nothing is decided until everything's decided.
Yeah.
So,
Something that changes.
yes. Right, and there was the applicant and some others were leaning heavily on the previously approved project for that site, which is now over 10 years old. Obviously, circumstances and conditions have changed. So everyone is well aware now that they're effectively starting.
Okay.
So they're working from scratch. They have a sketch at this point, not even a concept plan per se.
Yeah.
So they'll work through the process. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Great. Thank you.
So report, Lisa.
Good morning, everybody. We will do the financial reports there through January, so 10 months of our fiscal year. And then before we begin, I will point out, especially on the balance sheet, there's a few new line items related to the New York Court report, which the DC grounds project, which Shannon just reported on. So I separated those out so we could bring those out of our financial. So you can see those. So we'll begin with the statement of financial activities. On the revenue side, dues and contributions are $2,000 higher than revenue due to a private donation from the Friends Group. Government grants revenue is 89% of budget. This will remain a little bit under budget, proportionate to expenses below, which also came in under budget. Let's see, there's a new line item, OGS New York Works. So this is a revenue line item of $31,000 through January, and our contract began in June, and it's a 5-year contract, so we'll continue to report on that separately. Mitigation is $17,000 higher than revenue, and this is due to increased tonnage from the land itself. Fees revenue is on budget through the year. Other revenue is higher than budget due to both interest income and an $8,000 gain on a track vehicle that we got sold through auction. Operating revenue came in at 91% of budget through January. This is before our transfer from reserves to operating, and this was to fund our OGS New York Works account. This has been transferred back to reserves as of February. So we received the payment from DEC. We received it in advance of $1.25 million. Therefore, we replenished reserves to make that work to us. So this will not show up on the report in January, or in February and March. With the transfer, we had $104,000 or 104% of our revenue through the month of January. Moving on to expenses, personnel is $62,000 under. This is due to a vacant position for a few months in both salary and benefits. Travel and training are $19,000 under. This is due to a few departments did not attend training this year. And we're slightly under in travel in all departments. Contractual is at 92% of budget. Legal fees are under $27,000, and we're under $25,000 in Discovery Center exhibit. Communications is $43,000 under budget due to savings in telecom, and a big part of this is production and fabrication. We did not do some signage and stewardship and a Discovery Center exhibit. Occupancy is $62,000 under budget. Good news on that, there will be utility savings for $15,000. We're $47,000 under. And building costs and repairs through the Discovery Center. This is a holding account for any repairs, emergency repairs that we need to do. Supplies and equipment are $39,000 under budget. Majority of this is in stewardship for large supplies, i.e. fence posts, etc. Other expenses are $15,000 under budget, and this is mainly due to dues and fees, which will catch up. And expenses came in at 91% of budget. And if you look above operating revenues, it also came in at 91% of budget, giving us a $1.083 million operating surplus, which includes our $500,000 transfer from reserves, which we transferred back out in February. So capital expenditures are slightly under budget, and this is just due to the timing of the window replacement project. And as we look down at the non-cash revenue, I break this out because we have two non-cash items that are rather large, which is our New York State retirement payment versus what we record on our general ledger as 9%. So we actually pay out cash. The payment this year was $245,000, and the actual expense we recorded was $118,000. So there's a big cash difference here. I include that in personnel and fringe because it is part of our benefit. And then I back it back out here so you can see the true cost of our personnel and fringe without those credits. We have an OPEB credit. This is our other post-employment benefit. And we can touch on that when we look at the OPEB report. In essence, our discount rate increased, giving us a higher present value. So our OPEB credit is $27,000, and we had two subscribers this year due to a retirement. Depreciation expense is a little bit less than budget, again, due to the Windows project and the timing. And the net gain on investments is $417,000. We really gained $917,000, but we transferred $500,000. So investments are doing wonderful. So our total change in that position is $1.4 million. And on our Paris budget, which includes our balance sheet account, I'll take that. We have a $908,000. Onto our balance sheet, and here is you will see the OGS escrow account. So our total cash, if you take the first two, cash and cash equivalents and cash OGS escrow, is only $24,000 under. Again, I break that out because our OGS cash escrow account sits with OGS, but it is really our checking account. Grants receivable increased $587,000 through January, and this is due to the EC grant fund money owed, and this has been paid. OGS receivables is $32,000 through January. This is now zero. This has been paid as well, and we received an advance for 25% from the state, which is wonderful. Accounts receivable increased slightly just due to money owed for mitigation. Lease receivable stayed the same. This will be our GASB 87 entry on 3/31/26. This is both for TNC and Mohawk Land Conservancy rent. This will change once a year, usually on March 31st by auditors. Inventory decreased slightly just due to increased sales. Prepaid expenses are $56,000 less due to the reclass of prepaid expenses in March, recorded in April of this past year. Investments had a net increase of $417,000 due to a transfer of $500,000 into the OGS account and $917,000 gain through January from April. Land remained the same. Capital assets increased $254,000, mainly due to our large window replacement project. Capital assets for New York Works is our construction in progress for the New York Works program. Deferred outflows, you will see two line items that change once a year, and this is an actuarial report. It's about a 200-page report, APBP. From the retirement system, I record these entries directly from that report. So deferred outflows, which is actually an asset, decreased $214,000 due to changes of assumption of $244,000 based on the actuarial report. Because an increase of total net assets, a little over $1 million due to an increase in investment, grants receivable, and capital. On the liability side, accounts payable is slightly increased, but really unchanged. Deferred revenue decreased $7,000. This is due to the utilization of National Grid funds on the power line. New York pension liability, again, this is the actuarial report that I record once a year, decreased $342,000. Lease liability decreased $22,000. This is a reclass of prepayment of rent last year that we flipped into this year. OPEB liability decreased $27,000. Again, this is an actuarial report we do through Milliman. It's processed once a year, and we have an increase in the discount rate. And we also had 2 subscribers fall off due to retirement. Total liabilities decreased $398,000. Due both to an decrease in the deferred inflows for pension and OPEB. Capital assets increased $296,000 as above, due really to the purchases of the large window project, which is coming to a close. Reserve assets in the endowment remain the same. Reserve assets for OGS escrow account, and this is just the cash balance that we reserve down here, so you can see the separate asset allocation. So unreserved assets increased, giving us a total increase of net assets of $1.43 million, and this is reflected in our operating gains. So underneath the statement. Any questions on that? All good stuff. And on to investments through January, and this is from the beginning of April. We had a total gain of $916,000. So you will see in the reserve fund, it looks like we lost $349,000, but we really gained $150,000. And the realized gain, we just transferred $500,000 out. And as I said in February, we transferred that back in. So we'll have a large gain in that, and the gains all the way through. So looking great. I pulled February investments, and we went from $916,000 to $1.064 million. So great. March will change that just a tad, but great year so far, all the way around. Any questions? All right, thank you.
So this is in your packet, the other post-employment benefit information that you saw on both the income statement and the balance sheet that Lisa went over. So if you have any specific questions, but Lisa breaks this out based on a request several years ago by the audit committee. So we went through this in detail at the audit committee. If you have any specific questions, please you can answer them, but we had that change in liability basically based on the change. This is why I don't do it. Based on the change in discount rate, we had a credit of $27,150. Even worse when we have our investment people. Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda, action item. Do you want to write it?
Sure. So this is for, there are 4 properties, 96, 96A, 100, 100A Broader Street in both the town and village of Colony. Overall in the town of Colony, it's recommended for partial protection in our 2017 management plan update. Staff with DEC Region 4 real property that worked with Sean, and then folks from the Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy and myself walked this property because we had been told that the property owner had an interest in selling it for conservation purposes. This was potentially going to be developed as a bus garage for a county, for South County's school district. That fell through. It took it off the market. So we walked the property in the fall, and Mohawk Hudson staff, land protection staff, have had conversations with the owner off and on. So this is a recommendation or a request to acquire the property, and furthermore to acquire it using applying for DEC, the Open Space Conservation Grant Program. But as of yesterday, I don't think we're going to do that. But we still need the request to acquire it. So I'd like to modify this resolution, and then I'll show you the property with the maps. So to acquire it using the Open Space Grant Conservation Program or other similar funding sources. That makes sense. So if we can capture that in there, and then I can explain. So this is property to give you some context. Here are the 4 parcels. This is a large, almost 56-acre open space area adjacent. So here's all the habitat that's been restored adjacent to the landfill. It's been undeveloped for as long as I've been here, which is, as I was reminded earlier this week, 33 years. Never been a development proposal on it until a few years ago. Closer context, you can see it's all open space. It's got a number of wetlands on it. It's got a really interesting sand dune with a lot of native remnant pine barrens on it. And one of the cool things that Neil pointed out to me when we started to look at it is that this is a site when he and his science staff were tracking eastern whippoorwills, right? That's true. A male was using the site over a 3-week period back in 2019. Going from here into the preserve. So hanging out here and then going into the preserve with feed. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing too. So the reason that we may not apply for the open space grant is because it's really complicated working with the landowner we have to have a draft contract. We have to have other resolutions in place, and it has to be submitted by April 15th. And there's an issue with cleanup. There's buildings on it that have to be cleaned up, so that's going to have to be incorporated in the grant as well. And Mohawk Hudson has identified 2 other potential grant funding sources, and the threat's low, not on the market. And the landowner is sitting in a trust, so it's actually 2 individuals that sits in a trust. They're interested in really seeing this not developed. So we're kind of in a good situation. So I'm requesting that we were able to pursue it, and that we're able to pursue it through grant sources or other opportunities. Sorry, run on. I had amended once, as you know. It's recorded. Can I answer questions about? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you had already sort of any kind of management vision for what we would do there. If it became
Always,
residential.
Casey, always.
I don't think might be able to help.
Yes, the open sand dune, there's an opportunity to restore pine barrens there. open up the wetland to the rest of the pine barrens. Most of those wetland species actually like upland pine barrens when they're not in the wetlands, and there's a small locust cone to remove.
Here's the locust farm.
Yeah.
Here's the big sand dune.
Logistics in there could be interesting, given its location.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's the nature of the beast working here.
This is part of Trim Creek. Close on that Trim Creek.
And then that sort of cross boundary, is that just the railroad tracks essentially in Garland or something?
That's the railroad.
right?
Railroad, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Not too much worried about like car traffic. That we thought.
No, and,
Right.
and this development, this road goes back in here and basically stops. These are just paper streets.
Yeah.
So
So what's the access for us?
the access is here. Well, you would have
Down
access
the
off
road
this
and
paper. You would have access here. And you have access here. We came in here and we walked in here. Houses are back. There's a house there. Small house, about 1,000 square feet. And some outbuildings that are falling down. But it's one of the larger contiguous pieces that exist.
Okay. Any comments or other questions? We have a motion to accept the resolution. Casey? We have a second? Second. Don? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Harvey. The second resolution. Second resolution is multi-year vendor contract. This is for Chem Energy Water Treatment Inc. Chem Energy treats the water for the cooling tower and the closed water treatment for our HVAC system. They are proprietary. We have used them since we upgraded the cooling and chiller system in 2005. Their 3-year contract expires at the end of this month. This is another 3-year contract. It increases modestly at 2.2%. Contract here if you're interested in actually the specifics of what they do. Including Legionella.
Any comments or discussion? We have a motion to accept the resolution. With second? Don? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay.
And next, we have some presentations. The first presentation is from Key Private Bank, and it's on the annual report for our investment. If you want to do an introduction.
I can. Ken, would you like me to share? I can share the deck that you sent. So sure. So folks here have hard copies. Yep. Those who are remote obviously don't, so I can bring that up. Ken's convinced he's going to present for us. Ken keeps good track of all of our investments. And Susan Von Rode's here. She's our relationship manager and has been for quite a while. She takes good care of us as well. So Ken's going to kind of do a high overview. This goes through, these investments go through February, correct? And I will turn it over to you. I can jump to, tell me where to go. Key takeaway, or here, tell me.
Okay, what are we doing?
There we go.
So, appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. As Chris said, my name is Ken Sendrisky. I'm National Director of Institutional Investments for Key out of Cleveland. I was just commenting on a lovely facility. I'd love to see you in the fall or in the summer. We have a similar facility in Cleveland as some of you have heard of Holden Arboretum. Very, very similar properties. And, you know, the work that you do is amazing. So I'm going to try to keep my comments brief in light of everything that's sort of transpiring. Someone referenced the month of March and kind of the volatility that has occurred. So initially, we'll talk a little bit about the market, kind of what's going on, what's driving performance. I put in here an executive summary, so you don't go every portfolio, but behind that, you'll see all the portfolios, allocation, investment policy statement, compliance dashboards, as well as performance and holdings. And then there's an appendix group, which are just some economic slides, market slides that I thought you might find interesting in light of everything that's happening. So if you want to go to the market and economic summary page, we can talk a little bit about So what's been driving performance? Whoops.
This one. That's it, thank you.
So on page 4, so we talk a little bit about what's been driving performance in portfolios on a year-to-date basis as well as over the trailing 12 months. I will say I'm not an economist. I just try to interpret financial markets and what's driving portfolio performance. And as you can see in this report right here, over the last 12 months, having an allocation in your portfolio, there's a fair allocation in the global equity bucket to international equities. Having that allocation certainly was additive to portfolio performance in 2025 and thus far in 2026. Large cap domestic stocks really drove performance in 2025, but domestic stocks as a whole, and that's that black bar there, contributed positively to performance, even though international stocks significantly outperformed. On the fixed income side, and that would be to the right of your page where it says fixed income, intermediate fixed income delivered respectable returns in light of all of the volatility. Now that volatility has certainly increased here over the month of March, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But fixed income has been doing its job within portfolios, generating income, offering a ballast against equity investments within portfolios. I will point out within the fixed income bucket something that I like to look at on a regular basis. That's high yield. High yield bonds returned 7% over the trailing 12-month period versus 6.3% for intermediate investment grade corporate bonds. That's a good thing. Generally, when you see high yield bonds significantly underperform high quality fixed income, that would be a leading indicator that something beneath the surface is happening and directly impacts the economy. Fixed income markets are more realist, where equity markets are more optimistic. So if you look on a year-to-date basis, obviously things have changed. 2025 was dominated by the large 5 mega cap names, 7 mega cap names of the S&P 500. That's had somewhat of a reversal here in the first 2 months and 3 months of this year, as small cap stocks and mid cap stocks have generated higher performance relative to those large cap equities. And there's a host of reasons why those mega cap names have underperformed. Valuations were a little stretched, and because of artificial intelligence, it's calling into question, some of the earnings potential of software and hardware needs in that sector. So if you want to turn to the next page, give you a high level overview. This is all extremely dated. I'm not going to go through every paragraph. This is through the month of February, and as we all know here, things have changed dramatically starting out at the beginning of March. So I'll touch a little bit on what's happened year to date through February, and maybe some of our outlook, or at least how I see things playing out here in light of the conflict in the Middle East and what's going on here currently in March, because volatility has increased quite substantially. And just to point out, while we saw positive performance on a year-to-date basis, and we've seen a lot of volatility within equity markets and fixed income markets in the month of March, I will point out that equities, S&P 500 on a year-to-date basis from January 1 through March 19th, 18th, are only down about 3%. So amidst all that volatility and all that noise that we've seen from peak to trough, stocks are only down about 3%. Bonds year-to-date from January through March 18th are roughly flat, up 0.5%. So there seems like there's an awful lot of noise, but again, that volatility is happening from peak to trough here most recently in the month. So again, not reading through a lot of this information, I like to look at different themes that I think will impact financial markets on a go-forward basis. And I think some of the more visible themes that I see obviously are inflation, the economy, and geopolitical conflict. So as we look at inflation obviously is continuing to creep upward. The Federal Reserve the other day decided not to raise Fed funds rates because of the optionality, not only within the economy, but with inflation. I would anticipate as you kind of move through this year, you'll probably see prints for inflation move marginally higher, given the fact that oil prices are now over $100 a barrel. And that will have a direct impact on the economy. So from that perspective, the Federal Reserve is sort of boxed in. They can't raise rates to stave off inflation because that will restrict economic growth and ultimately over earnings, right? Because GDP is tied directly to the S&P 500 operating. can't cut rates to defend the economy and provide full employment because that will spur inflation. So it's an interesting dynamic at work here today. On the geopolitical front, as we look at what's happening in the Middle East, again, it's anyone's guess as to when and how the conflict resolves itself. The one thing that we do know it will eventually end. You know, eventually things have a way of working themselves out. We just don't know the implications. If the conflict, I'm reluctant to call it a war, but the conflict that we're now engulfed in, if it would tend to persist, it would have far more dramatic impact on the economy and on inflation, which could create additional volatility within financial markets, both in fixed income markets and the equity markets. So I'm not here to tell you that everything's going to be fine. I'm not here to tell you that everything is going to that we're going into a bear market. I'm just saying that there's an awful lot of optionality today within financial markets that are being impacted by the economy, inflation, and geopolitical risk. So on the next page, as we look at that, because of that optionality, you'll hear me say optionality a lot. Because of that optionality, we've taken a neutral position relative to long-term strategic asset allocations. So what does that mean? You'll see on the next page. What it means is if your strategic allocation, your long-term allocation that you struck to support your organization into the future is 60% stocks, 40% bonds, we're recommending to investors that they be 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Again, that optionality doesn't put us in a position where we think we need to take additional risk in client portfolios. We're using real assets and alternatives as diversifiers within portfolios. They are somewhat inflation hedges, but then again, hard assets like stocks are also inflation hedges. On the global equity side, we're neutral to the United States, neutral to international development, and neutral to emerging markets. We went to a neutral position early in 2025 because valuations look extremely attractive relative to valuations here domestically, which added to performance in portfolios. Even though in 2025 it was awfully difficult domestically to keep pace with the S&P 500 because of those 7 mega cap AI leverage types of names. On the fixed income side, we're neutral to duration, de-emphasizing treasuries, and neutral to high yield, while emphasizing investment grade quality corporates. So what does that mean? It means that if our benchmark for Barclays aggregate that has a duration of about, call it 5 years, we want our portfolio to have a duration of relatively 5 years. Again, the optionality around interest rates doesn't put us in a position to want to take any unnecessary risk. We're emphasizing investment grades over high yield because, again, the optionality within the economy and the current conflict would cause us to believe that high yield has some downside risk if the conflict were to persist and we saw inflation move higher and the economy slow down. You see spreads widen out and high yield underperform. Investment grade quality corporates offer the best risk-adjusted rate of return today, so that's the reason we're emphasizing. On the next page, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. It just goes through some of the rationale. A lot of this rationale is based upon February data, and I'm assuming here at the end of March, we'll have additional data to support sort of our neutral weight. I would suggest, because equities are always the largest allocation in the vast majority of client portfolios that have a time horizon greater than 10 years, we'll likely never ever be that underweight domestic equities or global equities within client portfolios. But we would make some changes around the fringes. So getting into the executive summary before I wrap up here, I put together a one-page summary because I thought it would be more helpful to go through this as opposed to flip through every single page in the presentation. All of this data is in the remaining part of the presentation under the individual portfolios. So if I'm moving, I would guess that's from left to right on the page. You can see we talked about ending values within the portfolios, total portfolio value of $10.9 million as of the end of February. Net gain within all portfolios was $294,000. Net gain represents net income as well as capital appreciation or depreciation within portfolios. You look at the endowment, it was up about $178,000. That's on a year-to-date basis. from January through the end of February. The Discovery Center, 5,800. The reserves, 60,000. And the over, 50,000. I would say if rates continue to go up, that increase in discount rate is really going to help you on the liability side because it's going to shrink the liability substantially. So, in terms of asset allocation, you can see each portfolio, how it's positioned relative to the strategic benchmark, which is right beneath it. So in the endowment, it's 52% equities, 46% fixed income. The Discovery is 51% equities, 46% fixed income. The reserves, 0% equities, 92% fixed income. And in that portfolio, we benchmark against the intermediate government credit, which is a more high quality, shorter duration benchmark than the aggregate, because we want that portfolio to be more stable. And then the over account, 40% equities, 57% fixed income, 3% cash. So as I look at the asset allocation, the ranges in the investment policy statement, I'll flip to the last column here. Are each of the portfolios in compliance? Each of the portfolios are in compliance. They're well within their ranges. They're almost right on top of the strategic asset allocation. And each of the benchmarks that we're using to benchmark portfolios are in compliance. So overall, you're totally in compliance. So on a trailing 12-month period, as I mentioned, 2025 was a really challenging year for active managers to keep pace with the S&P 500. The vast majority of active managers underperformed just simply because of the large concentration. I think NVIDIA alone is an 8% weighting in the S&P 500. Those top 7 names represent about 32% of performance of the S&P 500. And so most active managers are not willing to take or can't take that type of risk within portfolios. And by virtue of that fact, underperform the S&P 500. On a year-to-date basis, we did see a reversal, and for that reason, we see good performance on small and mid-cap, which we generally had a market to above market weight relative to our benchmarks. So trailing 12 months, for the endowment up 13.9, called 14%. These are all net of fees. Year-to-date up 4. The Discovery up 12. Year-to-date up 3.3. The reserves up 5.5. Year-to-date 1.5. Over up 9.8. Year-to-date 2.8. And then you see relative to the benchmarks. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and see if there are any questions.
Questions for that?
We gotta give
Don, give him one. Great presentation.
Can you folks see, without asking what specifically you expect, do you folks expect there to be any change in direction of the Fed given the leadership change?
I think I'm reading into the question correctly. I don't
Probably could.
Yeah. The Federal Reserve will in all likelihood continue to remain independent from the executive branch. I think that would be a bad thing if they're honest. Kevin Marsh, who is at least sitting in the wings, take over from Jeremy Powell. I don't believe that, I'm not an economist by trade, but I don't believe any rational economist could enter into that position and definitively reduce interest rates. Okay. Especially in the current situation when you have oil approaching $120 a barrel. So I think that the Fed will continue. Right now, if you look, how many of you look at Calci or any of those other websites? But financial markets right now are pricing in potentially one rate cut prior to the end of the year. There's a higher probability that there are no rate cuts prior to the end of the year. And in fact, potential for a Fed rate increase sometime this year. So if you look at Powell's comments yesterday, he decided to keep rates stable or unchanged. The economy's good. The economy continues to grow, even though we're struggling with above trend line inflation. I think the Fed is taking a position where there's just too much optionality to make a decision. That answers the question.
No,
I'm not a politician. so
not
I'm not
really,
trying to-
not really. Yeah, we did.
I mean, from, if
I
you
think
just,
that's anybody.
you know, again, I try to interpret financial markets, and if you're interpreting financial markets correctly, the Fed likely doesn't do anything this year. Barring a change, right? I know no one likes to talk about this word, but you probably have heard this word in financial press, and if you're old enough, like me and been around, you probably heard the word stagflation. So, you know, you're kind of entering an environment where stagnant economic growth coupled with inflation, which puts the Fed in a difficult position. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Wait, but it does, it won't be at 18% prime.
Right. We're moving from a very low base. Any other questions?
Did you see the media article? No,
Because we heard it.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, people were wondering what happened. I live just north of where it landed. I can see videos.
That's a good question.
That is a really big change.
The building, the tower? Oh, okay.
Any other questions? Ken?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have a presentation on community science from Alexandria.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about our community science project today for 2025. Starting about what our community science program is. I'm going to try to do that.
Get it on the screen.
You're gonna touch the screen?
I know.
So our community science program helps us in two main ways. So helps us evaluate the ecological condition of the preserve, and in turn helps us inform management decisions. This helps the science team. And then on the other side of that, it also helps us engage local residents with the preserve and the work that we're doing here. And that helps to foster both understanding and appreciation of the preserve. So here are some of the offered programs for the 2025 year. I do the first five, and then Tammy Price, who is our preserve naturalist, does the last three there. So this kind of just goes over people that were trained for these projects and then people who actually helped us collect data. So Barron's Buckmoth, we had 12 trained and 10 collected data. American Woodcock, we had 22 trained and 19 collected data. For Eastern Whippoorwill, we had 22 trained and 16 collected data. Snowpack monitoring, 9 trained and 17 collected data. That's kind of because Snowpack has been very long running and some of these people have been trained so often that they know how to do it. Carter Blue Butterfly surveys, 4 collected data. I have a star there because this is kind of just a pilot project before it became an official community science project. So there wasn't a formal training. And only 4 collected because these were long-standing volunteers that helped us. For Frog Watch, 31 were trained and 27 were certified as frog watchers. IMAP invasive, 21 were trained. And then this national butterfly count, 12 were trained and there were 9 participants for the count. So you can see, although some people that were trained didn't go on to collect data, there's quite a lot of people that helped us. And this contributes finally into 59 community scientists that contributed data in 2025. This also takes into account that many of these people
contribute to multiple different projects. Gonna go into each one that I was working on. So starting with Barron's buck moth monitoring, we monitor these moths because they're a great indicator of the preserve, the condition of the preserve, because they feed on scrub oak. The monitoring happens between September 26th, October 17th. That was what it was this year, give or take, sometimes it changes. This year, I was really curious to see if numbers change depending on survey efforts. So I had community scientists go out, and then I also had a field technician go out. There was different survey efforts. The field technician went out every single day for all sites, whereas community scientists, we asked them to do at least 3 during the entire flight period. So you can see the difference in the graph there. So the top graph is field technician. She counted 371 moths for that entire period. Community scientists counted 79. So survey effort makes a really big difference. You can see the actual curve of the emergence of the moths there, whereas the one on the bottom, kind of harder to see a pattern. But both data showed a really similar response to management. So it was actually 1-to-1 when we looked at the units that they were looking at. So all the units that were the highest for the field technician were also the highest the community scientist got. So it's really just a matter of how many times they go out to survey. Otherwise, it is very accurate. On the other side, we also have American woodcock surveys. These occur between April 20th and May 15th. They're listening for these birds that are displaying, males that are displaying and making noise in the afternoon into the evening. This is actually a very accurate survey. It's based on U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the American Woodcock Sea and Ground Survey. Theirs is obviously a larger scale than ours, but looking at the graph on the bottom compares our data in the orange to U.S. Fish and Wildlife data in like turquoise blue. They are pretty similar despite being different scales. They have like 10,000 sites that they do. We only have a couple. So that was a maximum last year of 2.25 male woodcocks on average, which is pretty usual for what Fish and Wildlife was getting, maybe a little lower. And numbers appeared really consistent despite varying numbers of surveyors, which is what this top graph is showing. So you can see in orange, that's the number of surveyors varying year by year, but the number of woodcocks they were counting was really consistent. Despite that, I think in 2021, the number of woodcocks went down despite the number of surveyors going up. So it seems really consistent no matter who's doing it. So that's great. Whippoorwill surveys, we do these because this is a declining species that recently returned to the preserve after a 30-year absence. It's really important to know where they are in the preserve, and that helps us direct our efforts to catch them and put GPS tags on them to see where they're going and what areas they're using in the preserve. So these surveys are occurring from May 11th to June 11th. Unfortunately, only one bird was heard by our surveyor. During the survey itself, some birds were heard outside of the survey. Some people decided to go out and look longer than the actual survey period, so they did hear that. To kind of help that more, we're thinking of including a playback song during surveys. That's going to be trialed next year. Because oftentimes when we were in the field, we noticed that they weren't really singing or making any noise until we played back a song, and then they all started to respond. So that might help for next year. Snowpack monitoring. This is really helpful because it helps us predict impact on our species. So specifically, the Carner is overwintering as an egg, so that's under the snow. If there's a lot of snowpack, that's helpful for the Carner. If there's not a lot, they're more exposed to fluctuations in temperature. So this is helpful for us. So starting in November 1st, they start to put out their stow gauges in their own yard. So these are all preserve neighbors that are within a half mile of the preserve. And then they read their snow gauges once a week into April. Some people take more than just one reading a week. They're really into it. Last year for the 2024-2025 season, I got 412 submissions from 17 sites. That's that map here. So those are all the sites around the preserve. the green sites have been reading or participating since 2016. And I can say, because it's happening now for this year, all of those people are also participating this year. So that means they've been participating in this project for 10 years, which is great. And then when I analyzed the data, I found that it correlates really specifically with Albany Airport data. So these are really accurate readings that they're getting. So that's pretty great. Carter Blue's butterfly surveys. Like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of like a pilot community science survey that we started. This is just presence absence surveys to help us fill in gaps of surveys that we're doing with the science team, which is our distance sampling surveys to get actual abundance. This is just telling us, is the Carter in this unit? Is it not in this unit? So when this was done, Carters were detected in 23 of the 28 unit surveys, which is great. This map here kind of shows where they were detected and where they were not detected. The blue is absent, the dark green is present, and then light green is unsurveyed. We could potentially add those unsurveyed areas to the survey next year because it is becoming a permanent survey in 2026. And then it will have a formal training associated with it. So my takeaways, overall, this does provide really valuable information to us, helps us with species presence and abundance, beyond what we can do with the science team, and also with environmental conditions and abiotic factors like snowpack. Some projects work better in this community science framework than others, like the Carter, snowpack, woodcocks are all working really well. We can think about how to adjust how some of the other projects work to make them work better, like with buckmoth. But overall, this is a really effective tool, and the bottom line is that it gets people working with us, understanding the kind of things that we're doing, and really fosters that appreciation for this place. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
I was just curious about the partners, like what scale was that, like per parcel or
Yeah,
per patch or something like?
it's per unit, so the surveys really varied. Like some people spent like 2 hours doing one. Some it's very small parcels, so it was only like 20 minutes or something like that. We asked them to go into the parcel and kind of do a zigzag. They are asked to count and try to sex the corners that they see, but for the most part, it's just presence absence.
Questions for Alex? Great, thank you.
Next, we have a report on the volunteer program annual summary. Sarah, you good?
Good morning, everyone. So I will start by saying this presentation was given to our volunteers directly on January 14th. We held a volunteer appreciation evening for them. So they were able to see firsthand the kind of members of the program. This is similar to the one that you attended last year that I gave. So this is just updated members from 2025. Of course, I started out by thanking the staff, not only that helped me work throughout the year with collaborating on this volunteer program. I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times, but the staff here is incredible. And a large part of the volunteer program success and retention is thanks to multiple staff members taking the time to really foster those relationships. And of course, several members helped me put together the event itself. So I'm always very grateful to work with this incredible team, and so are the volunteers. So getting right into it, our trailside interpretation program kicked off last year. We did a lot of work to expand it. The idea of this program is that these people who may not be coming into the center and just going around the trails, or people who may be coming here for the first time on a nature fun. Last year, 6 volunteers volunteered at 15 days, greeting 309 visitors. That number is excluding when we did trailside interpretation on special events, including Nature Night Out. So those are just people coming up to a trail being greeted by one of our volunteers, either just as a friendly greeting, a place to answer questions, perhaps with some more orientation on where exactly they are that may not have done before. Our docent program saw a growth of 16 new volunteers last year. That was 2 sets of 8.
So 2 sets of 8 all went through the training, all finished onboarding, and all volunteered for multiple shifts, which was really great. These volunteers are incredible, frontline interpretation at the Discovery Center. And cumulatively in 2025, they donated 844 hours and personally greeted 5,800 visitors, which is pretty significant. Those are anybody from school groups, special interest groups, and these right visitors. So they're a huge help in making sure that people who come in feel welcome. Our Incredible Naturalist program, overseen by Ms. Price, they encountered 1,500 visitors last year, donating 258 hours of service and completing 243 trail reports, giving us a really good idea of what's out there from several days of the year. This program is kind of exciting because it opened for the first time at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And we have a few naturalists coming on board, which is really exciting because new perspectives and people noticing new things, and obviously a greater set of information. Our Pirates Ambassador program goes out into the community doing tabling events. This right here was taken at 2 of them last year. In 2025, they went to 15 events, greeting at least 1,500 people, and of course, handing out stickers. We have some really great Pine-Bush stickers, which draws a lot of people to the to our incredible little display here and helps keep the conversation going and encourages people who may have questions in the community to ask them. Our program assistants helped on 19 programs last year, many of which are after-hours programs, so this full moon, value back kinds of programs. But not limited, they also did our reading and bird watching programs, and they continue to be a very essential piece of running our programs here. Conservation days kicked off last year in partnership with our stewardship program. We have 40 different people come for doing a single day work project, including 3 companies and 1 high school eco club, which is actually reached back out. We'll be coming back in April to do more work. That's the picture here. Conservation days themselves were free planned work days, and members from the public could sign up and help with the project. People who are just like, hey, I want to get involved, what can I do? This is the opportunity for them. So 30 different people signed up for those programs across 5 different days, and those were all led by volunteers. Our seed collection program is, of course, super important. These numbers do not include numbers of pounds of lupin, but that is what this photo is of. So at least 13 volunteers went out donating 91 hours to collect native seeds, collecting at least almost 100 pounds excluding lupin. So that is a significant amount of seeds. Thank you to Bodie for giving me those numbers. And there is a lot of interest in this program, especially this year. I have received probably 30 emails in 2026 alone of people interested in this. So we're getting out and people are very interested in this program. So I'm excited to see how that goes this year. We do, of course, have volunteers on our fire crew. The total was 373 acres. Really great people. Our community gardener, Erin, does a lot of her recruiting volunteers and going out in the summer months to keeping the grounds looking nice. 8 volunteers went out across 5 different days to do a lot of clipping, getting the vases out of there, making the front garden and surrounding areas look really nice. This is another very eager group of volunteers that are really dedicated to coming out on an early summer morning and getting those vases out. Alex obviously just did an incredible community science presentation, so I won't touch too much on this, but I will share a pretty remarkable story, I think, from that. On our butterfly count day, there's actually this couple here. They visited early in the year in 2025. They actually live in Brooklyn, and because the butterfly count is held on July 4th, they loved it so much, and they had the day off, they decided to do the training and spend their holidays coming up from New York City and doing the count with us, which I thought was pretty significant. So they came up super early, spent the whole morning out in the field and on their trails, counting butterflies, and that's how they spent the holiday, which I thought was quite charming. Again, our community science expanding this year with the corner surveys. There's a print flyer of this that has been distributed at outreach events already to help people, you know, hey, I want to sign up, what can I do, what can you do to get involved? This is the whole calendar, people can kind of plan their whole year. It's also good because a lot of parents have announced ways that they can get their kids involved. And so we've actually had a few parents sign up to have their child do it with them. Our bird banding volunteers The 17 helped out in our programs this year across 11 days. That includes maps and our banding demos. Picture right there is actually one of our younger volunteers. His name is Sebastian. He is an incredible birder and he's super enthusiastic. And I think it's just a really cool, like, oh, look at that, you know, it really, this kind of place, an early inspiration for him where who knows where it's going to go, he's very brilliant helping out. So these are great enthusiastic volunteers and obviously a really cool way to get out and serve. Our special events are not possible without our volunteers, of course. In 2025, 35 different volunteers came out to help us with each one. Several volunteers helped with multiple events. Those include the Discovery Center, which is just held in February. Of course, they come back out and help again. But of course, Lupin Fest, a whole month, helping with events surrounding that. Our 3 Nature Night Out and Smoky Bear Day, which is what this photo is from. Friends of the Pine Bush held 28 events last year on Meetup, which is where most of the following is on. On that website, they had 2,500 followers last year, which is a pretty good benchmark. Part of Lupin Fest, they held Night with the Arts, which is a fundraiser, also honoring wildlife artist Wayne Trim. His family is pictured there. So it's kind of a collaborative honorary thing and fundraiser for the Friends. It's a really lovely night. They also sponsored 705 students in 2025 as part of their Ticket to Ride program. These are our 12 people who were nominated for Volunteer of the Month last year. And what I think is kind of the most exciting part of this group of volunteers is almost every single one of them volunteer in more than one thing. Some have started as community scientists and have gone off to become docents and vice versa. In June, Kathy, she's part of our fire crew, but she also submits to our perspectives every year and has made it in at least the past 2 years. So all these people are really heavily involved and really care about the mission here and are pretty regular faces, just really sweet. So again, what does this all mean? What is the value on it? So independent sector is a widely used resource for calculating, again, the value of volunteer hours. This rate is up 3.2% from 2023. These are a year behind. These are released every year in April. So that is the 2024 rate. So that's the most accurate one I can give. The number here is only hours that was able to cross-reference. So verified logged hours, whether that be, I know they were here for a special event, they logged their hours in our internal logging system. So it's a super underestimate because I did not have final hours for Friends. Community scientists, we don't have them to log their hours. So the number here, at least almost $85,000, was donated just in volunteer time alone last year. I would be comfortable putting that number over 100,000 if I was able to calculate realistically all the community science time, all the times that volunteers already got the log, all the 5 projects that they do. But again, that is the minimum amount of volunteers doing last year, which is again incredible, significant, and these are the people who really care about what we do and the program itself. So again, this was presented to our volunteers, and it was just a genuine thank you for all that they do, because they do a lot here. They make our place kind of feel more like a community. And so some of this was presented to the public. Our educator, Hannah Mather, put together a post, this one on social media. I don't want to take her credit, but she compiled a lot of these numbers. And it got quite a bit of traction behind, so she put together that I could kind of pass on at the end here to kind of who we are, letting people know all that we do here, because it deserves to be recognized. And it's got a lot of traction, something people are definitely interested in. The flyers that were passed around is another way that we're kind of getting the word out and how expansive our volunteer program is, both in a way to kind of show off and to potentially recruit more people who may be interested in seeing all that we do. That's right. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Who wants to volunteer? Reach out to Sarah. Who has questions for Sarah? No? All right.
Is this level of service information on the preserve website?
No. It's picked up in social media.
Should be on the website.
We're updating our website. So we will update. Amy says yes.
Noted.
Which one did you?
Wendy's behind the.
working.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, and as part of the conversation that we had with the kickoff with the website developer, to talk about this kind of thing, adding numbers, quick bursts,
Those are pretty solid numbers.
they're very solid. Yes. Yep. And thanks to Sarah and our other staff that did it too. Okay.
Okay. Is there any other business before the commission this morning? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Right. Take a second. Take a shot. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Our next meeting is June 18th. Thursday, June 18th, and then the next one will be September 6th.
Pretty impressive when you take all the.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah.